So today, you guys, we're going to start building our cell phone holder. With that, depending on how your teacher has it set up, you need to acquire your material. You're going to need material very much like this one. It's going to be 1/2 inch thick by 2 inches wide, and you're going to need at least 26 inches long. We're going to cut this back apart into 4 different pieces with only 2 measurements. We're going to keep them at 5 and 7.5. So we're going to need 2 of each material cut out of this one 26-inch long piece. So let's show you how to measure those up. First, we're going to measure up our long ones. So using our tape measure, using our tri-square or our speed square, depending on which ones you have available in your shop. We'll use our speed square today, or our framing square. We're going to measure up our 7.5 inch piece. Alright, so we're going to measure our pieces. We're going to need our 7.5 inch pieces and our 5 inch pieces. So we're going to start with those 7.5 first. Taking your tape measure or ruler, come down to 7.5, and then you're going to make a crow's foot on there. We start right at the mark and bring one angle one way, and then the other one the other way. That way we know exactly at that arrow is where we're at 7.5. Then, using either a tri-square or framing square, we take that lip, that edge onto it there, press it down onto our board, and slide it over to our mark. Once we're right on our mark, we take it and we scribe our line right through, and that's the line we're going to be cutting. Let's cut that one to begin with. Taking it over to our miter box. Your miter box, make sure there's different orientations, but make sure it's secured onto your table work surface so that you can saw through it and not have to hold on to it. Bring our material down, and we're going to, just since we're making a cross cut, we're going to use just this center piece. So we're going to line up our line right on that center mark there, and then I'm going to take one more clamp and I'm going to clamp it down in place so that then I can have both hands available. With our material pushed up tight against that fence, I'll keep one hand on this side to hold it tight. And then I'm going to take my cross-cut saw, or my back saw. And cut it through. Slide it down through the fence, lines up right on my line, double check both sides, hold it in place, and then just begin sawing. As long as I can push forward and back, and then I'm creating sawdust, I'm cutting the material. So you don't have to overkill, just cut your material nice and straight. Once I feel it cuts through, don't continue cutting. You don't want to cut all the way through the plastic. Leave that there. And here is my first 7.5 inch block. I'm going to need two of these total, 2 of the 5 inch total. So let's start marking those. One more 7.5. Make my next crow's foot. Bring my square up to it. Slide it nice and tight. One, two. So with this final cut, I got just a little bit of material there. I'm not going to have so much room to clamp down or hold on to. So whatever you have space for, I can slide it over here and just barely catch it with my clamp. So that's what I'm going to do. And then try to keep one thumb pressed against here and holding this way. Just make sure your fingers never cross your saw line. Put your blade in first. Just hold everything nice and tight up against that far fence. Now I've got my 2 pieces. 5.5, 5.5. Beautiful. 7 and 7. Clean up my scraps. And I'm ready to go on to the next. So now we're going to start our layout. The first thing we're going to lay out is on our 5.5 inch pieces. All right. What we're going to do is actually make this layout here. So it's going to be half of like a letter T when we get them both together. So we need to make what we're going to cut out. What we need to do that cut is measure down 1.5 inches And then make sure that we split this 2-inch piece into 1-inch side and a 1-inch side. So let me show you how to get those now. So on the back side here, I'll get our measurements. So with it, we want to measure down 1.5 inches. So the big line right in between our 1 and our 2-inch, the biggest line there is where I'm going to start with using my framing square. I bring it up, make it nice and flat, mark down 1.5 inches. Now I'm just going to put a little line across there because I'm not cutting it, so I don't need a crow's foot. Then turning it sideways, marking my 1 inch over right along that line. So 1 inch is right there. Mark it first, scribe it across. That's giving me that top of that T. Then since I'm my inch in here, I need to get another 1 inch line down there. So coming around, measuring my 1 inch in down here, line it up, measure 1 inch in. Now I simply just have to connect those two dots. So coming off the end of my board, again trying to make everything flat, square, line up my two lines there, hold it in place, come through, then this is going to be my trash side. So there's my 1.5 inches up here, and then my 2-inch sides, and then this gets cut out. We need to make that 2 times, so we have a whole nother block here. There's my 2 T's. We'll end up gluing them together to make your phone holder. So now we're going to mark out on our 7-inch pieces. All right. With that, we need to be able to get a slot made right through the middle that our shelf is going to fit on. To fit that slot, I've got it laid out here with some measurements already onto it. Now we're going to be taking out this center piece here. I'll show you how to lay those out in just a second. But with it, that center piece is going to be 1 inch up, 1 inch in from both sides, and then be roughly 1/2 inch thick, maybe 9/16 because you got to slide that board through. So let me show you how to make those measurements now. So I'm going to just use my speed square or my framing square. I'm going to start with marking my 1 inch line, that's that one from the bottom, and then that 9/16, which is that 1.5 inches but plus one more, so I'm going to be marking right there. So let's mark those lines up to begin with. So from the bottom of my board, make it nice and flat and tight, bring it in here, mark my 1 inch line, mark my 9/16 line. Come to my second board. Do the same thing. Make sure it's pushed up nice, tight, and flat. 1 inch, 9/16. Then the length of that slot is a 2-inch length, so it's 1 inch in from this side and 1 inch in from that side. If I have these very parallel and flush at the bottom here, I can mark them both at the same time across that line. So I come up to those marks, find it here. So I'm going from my 1 inch to my 3 inch, because that'll give me a 2-inch line there. Then come back up to my other marks up here. 1 inch to 3 inch, right across those lines. Then finally I'm going to need to connect those at the end. They still mark up right. And this will be my trash, this will be my trash. And so I'll line them up. That makes the same slot. We're going to cut one more notch just so that you can slip your cord through. So since we have that first layout going, right here in the bottom, we're going to cut just a little triangle wedge out so your cord will be able to come right through and not have to have it wrap around the edge. With that, we're going to make that 1/2 inch up. So again, using my square, bringing it up to here to 1/2 inch, which is our next little mark here. If that's too hard to read for you guys, being right there, you can also still come back to a regular tape measure and measure up to 1/2 inch. So putting it on there, marking 1/2 inch here. Off of this one, we're going to do the same idea, marking up 1/2 inch right here. So those two 1/2 inch marks will line up. We're going to cut just a 45-degree angle out from them. So using our square here, it's got this nice angle to it. Bring it in, hold it up nice and tight, slide it to there, right to your mark. And that's what we're going to cut off on each one of these. That way, once it's all glued together, you have your slot, and then this will be trash, and your cord can slide right up to be able to charge it in. So now we're going to make our cuts on our little 5-inch pieces. Remember, with these being set together, they're going to make our letter T there. So with them, I've got a jig set up here so that then it'll give me my 1-inch gap between there and the blade, but I got to set up the bandsaw. So first thing I want is that blade guard brought all the way down so it's just 1 finger width above the tool, above the material. Set that. Then I need my safety glasses on. Make sure my hair, my sleeves, my jewelry, all the regular stuff for our bandsaw safety is taken care of. And now that I have my jig set up, I'm going to cut this. If I cut this right now, my hands are going to be within that 3 inches. So make sure you have some push sticks at the ready so that then you can utilize it and keep your hands out of the motion. So we're going to have this all set up, my extra piece off on the side. Start the tool before I begin cutting it. Holding it down, holding it against my fence, and slide it on up. I push until it stops in the back there. Then I'm going to remove my material. Bring my cut back. And that last little bit, like you can see it's cut through, that last little bit we're going to cut with just a handsaw in there. So let me cut the second one. Perfect. Next we're going to go to cutting these tops off. Right now I have my table vise, my wood vise, and I want to be able to cut that line off. I'm going to cut them both together so that I know that when they glue up, that everything is perfectly symmetrical. So the first thing I need to do is make sure that they match up on the top and they're nice and flush, top to bottom, nice and flush. Then I've got my line right there that I want to transfer across both of them, and then actually put one across the back here so that then I can know right where I'm going to be cutting. So having my material here, bring it down, take my square, hold it in place, line it up with that top mark here, so we're going to bring that right on there. Hold it in place, scribe that line, and then we got to bring that line down the face of it here. So again, holding it all in place. And come down. So now I have my line that wraps all the way around, and my waste material I'm going to be cutting off on both sides. Put them in my table, in my clamp, my vise. Double check my top is flush, double check my ends. And then I'm ready to saw. The easiest way to start a cut like this is to do a couple of back strokes on it so you get a little notch going through there before you start your forward stroke. So holding it right on my line here, not holding it on my fingers. Pull it straight back. And see how the little notch is going? I like to take about 3 of them. 1, 2, 3. And then I start with my forward cuts. Next, we're going to cut out that slot at the bottom. So again, we're going to make sure that they match up to each other, because when we glue this up, we want to make sure that slot matches, not one's up and one's down. So we're going to start with them back to back, make sure they're flush off the table, and then we got to wrap that line around the top here again. So holding it down, taking my square, taking my pencil, and then start with those couple of back cuts just to get some notches going. And then I'm going to start this one. And we'll be ready to cut those straight down. With it though, make sure you're looking when you stop your cut that it's even on both sides. So you can't be cutting at an angle. In the end, you're going to want a nice flat cut. Good to go. We'll finish those off with the chisel on the workbench. So now that we've cut those two lines there, we got to come back and cut our 45-degree angle off. Because remember, once these come together, that's where the cord's going to come through that side. So again, to cut those so they match even, I'm going to line them up, make them flush, and then I'm actually going to use the 45 on my miter box here. So I'm going to bring it right up to this wall, because that's where it's going to push against, line it up right with this line here, and then clamp everything down and in place. With that all lined up, then I take my back saw. Remember, this is a push saw, so I'm going to have to push forward onto it. So try to get some of those cuts. Just take your time. There's no rush. It's just a little piece you're taking off here. My two pieces. And my 45. Next, we're going to have to chisel that out. We're going to chisel using our workbench. Make sure you set up a scrap board so that you don't chisel into the work table. And then also, because we're using a hammer and chisel for it, you're going to need some of your PPE. So grab a pair of safety glasses just for anything that might bounce back up. So setting up my board here, I want to take and clamp it in place. And then one piece at a time. We have our saw cut lines here. So I want to make sure I chisel right with those saw lines, if anything, a little bit on the inside, because I don't want to crack out the whole rest of part of my piece. I can always sand or file down to my line. So keeping that in place here, grabbing my chisel. Your chisel has an angle to it. Keep the flat side to your flat side and angle forward into what you're chiseling. So I line it up on my line here, bring it down. And just little taps will take it right out. Got one done, then I can file and sand those chip marks off. And my second piece. So we just chiseled those parts out. So now we need to sand and file some of our pieces. We want to make sure everything again is flat and flush as best we got. So line them up. And so to file these together to make them nice and even, I'm going to put them back in my vise here. And any assorted set of files, because we have a whole set of files for you, figure out what's going to work best to keep getting everything flat and smooth. So bring them in, file all my kerf joints, file all my miscuts. Then I got my chamfer there, so sand that off. So we're working a little bit on our finished work because eventually we're going to end up gluing this together, and that's going to be much harder to file later. Once we have those set up, we can try and test fit it. Bring everything here, slide it together, grab a clamp, and see if our T will slide through. If it doesn't slide through, then we know we got to adjust something on them. Have my board, then once I'll glue up my T here, this should slide right on through. Perfect. That's a beauty. Alright, so now we're going to start our glue up. So we've done some minor sanding. We made sure that these fit, made sure this fits. We're going to have to do some final sanding overall. But one of the easiest ways to start this glue up we're actually going to do is take our pieces, line them up so that they're nice, flush, and level, all those good things. And then we're going to take some tape. Run some tape down the seam, open it back up, run a line of glue, and then put it back together so that then everything doesn't slip and slide on us. So let's line these up and get some tape going. Now, with these both taped up, flip them over, and we're going to put glue right up that joint and glue right up this joint. You don't need a lot of glue, so whatever wood glue you have available will work. Put a little bit down it, spread it out. And then bring your pieces together. Once you have your pieces together, we're still going to clamp them in place. Again, working that they're nice, flat, and flush. Press them down. Clamp that joint, and then clean up your squeeze out. Let those sit overnight, and we're good to go. Alright, so now you guys, we have our pieces. We've left them overnight to dry, so we've had the clamps on them. We lined them up with our tape, making sure our edges are nice and flat and square. So let's take off these clamps. Then for the sake of time, and since we have all the tools available, we're going to use a palm sander for this. This can be done with just using our regular sanding block and some 80 grit sandpaper. We're going to use the 80 grit sandpaper and sanding block anyway to do our chamfers on the side. But to get rid of our glue line right down here and any of our pencil marks from our layout, we're going to palm sand this. Palm sander is a power tool, so in my shop, all power tools still need safety glasses. So if you turn it on, you put them on. So we'll start taking it this way, and we'll palm sand the face. One, two. Next, with our boards here, we're going to be making that chamfer along the side, that decorative edge. Now, we could measure it out and do lots of calculations with that, but a good friend of mine, Mr. Palmer, showed me that your regular standard pencil is about 1/4 inch. If you have a brand new regular pencil, not crushed, not mechanical, you can simply take your material, set it down on the table, take your pencil, sand it on the side, and scribe your line right along the edge there. We take that along all the decorative edges that we're going to put onto it. They come out all facing equal distance. Then what we need to do is do the face on it, because this is where we're going to put that angle. So if we set it down this way, scribe our line here, we got those two sides, one on the top and one on the front. We're going to take off the material right in between those. So let me get this side as well. And finally our last side. With that, that's what we're going to be able to take off and sand off using just our 80 grit and our sanding block. So after you've marked and measured all your chamfers for on this T-piece here, we want to also add that detail around your board here, just so that when we have both boards in here set together, those chamfers make a nice finished looking piece to it. So again, using just your regular pencil, bringing your board down, we're going to chamfer on that face side. So which side's my pretty side? Here's my pretty side. Down, put your pencil on, scribe that line all the way down. So we have all those side chamfers done. Now we need to do the face on it. So setting it again on the table. Then between all those lines, again, you're going to take your 80 grit or a file and sand this down. So depending on how your sandpaper is in the shop, this is a piece that's left over. So we're going to just use it. Put it on your tabletop and sand away. Sand till your line comes, your chamfer, your angle, comes just touching both of those lines. We don't want to go over the lines. This is how we're going to make it even all the way around on all your sides. So I'm just touching my lines on each side so I get this nice little edge to it. We can come back with this was our 80 grit to shape it. Then we can clean it up with our 220, take all of our pencil marks off, and get it to be nice, ready for finish. Before we get that far into it though, we want to make sure that we have our assembly right, and then we're going to drill our hole for that charging cable to come through. To drill that hole, we're going to go over and use the drill press. Before we use the drill press, we want to be able to mark our hole down. We're going to mark it down at 1 1/4 inch. So using a tape measure, using a ruler, whatever you got, 1 1/4. So a fourth is half of a half. So it's 1 inch plus the next longest line. So these are 16ths, so that would be 4/16 or 2/8, but we're getting to the 1 1/4. So taking it off off the flat part, not off the chamfer, 1 1/4, gonna mark right there. And I already know where my center is because that's where my joint is. So I'm gonna be drilling my hole right there, right in the middle of that. So let's head over to the drill press. So now we're at the drill press. Yours might look a little different, but all of you at this point in shop, you should have passed your safety test for the drill press. I understand that this could be done with a hand drill, but for first-time users, a drill press and clamping it down is a little bit easier to get started. So with my mark there, I'm going to bring it on over to my drill press. But before I press that down, I want to double check that my jam nuts are not going to drill through my table. I need to just come down to the sacrificial wood so we don't drill into that metal table. So knowing that I have this already set up, perfect, line it up. Then my piece of wood here is that smaller than that 6 inches. So if I grab this here, my fingers are closer than those 2 inches. So having such a small piece here, I'm going to have to hold it in place and then use a drill press clamp. We're going to take it and clamp it into place so that nothing moves on it. Clamp it in, check it one more time that I'm hitting right on my dot there, and we're ready to go. So pull for on, long smooth pull down, don't force it through, we don't want to crack it out. Let the bit do the cutting. Feel it pop through, stop on my jam nuts there, I can't go any further. Let it up, turn it off, wait for it to stop spinning, release my clamp. There's my charging hole. We'll clean that up with a little bit of sandpaper and get it all sanded smooth, ready for 220, so that then depending on what finish is available for you in your classroom, we'll let the kids figure that one out.